So, you want to learn how to set up your guitars, but you don't want to pay those pesky professionals to do it for you. Today we're going to see if we can set up a guitar using the ultimate budget tools only sourced from Temu. Let's go. Righto YouTube, your favorite tight-ass guitarist is back again. We're going to have a look to see if we can set up a guitar using only Temu tools. The guitar in question today is a 2000 model Ibanez GS860. Fun fact, it's my first guitar. I learned to play on this thing, so it has a lot of sentimental value. But if this sort of stuff is helpful for you, please consider liking and subscribing. That would mean the world to me. Leave a comment down below the sort of tools that you use for your own setups too. I'm really curious about fret crowning files and nut files as well. They're one of the tools that I don't think you can really cheap out on, and I wouldn't mind upgrading it to a better one in the future. So let me know which ones you guys use. So what we're going to do today is just have a look at some tools. Stick around at the end of the video though, because I'll let you know my ratings on them to see if they're actually worth spending your money on, or go out and buy some better stuff. What we're not doing though is a full setup video. So if you want to learn how to set up your own instrument, there are YouTube videos galore. If you want to learn that sort of stuff, this isn't the video for you, but please go and check out some other resources because you'll learn how to do it yourself that way. Okay, so the first tool we're going to have a look at that we got from Temu is a little neck support, little wooden one. It's got foam inserts on it, so it protects your neck when you're doing adjustments on it, which is awesome. It's relatively lightweight, fits under the neck really nicely. I do wish it was just a little bit taller though, but for its intended purpose, it gets the job done, and it will set you back this many dollars. Tool numero deux. We have got a notched straight edge. So what this thing is designed to do is sit over your frets on your fretboard, so you can see whether or not your fretboard is flat. So instead of doing the rookie error thing where you sight down the length of the neck, you stick this over the top of it, hold it up to a backlight, and see if you've got any light shining in between the gaps. So the next step after you have got your neck straight and flat and looking awesome is you get your strings off, get a Sharpie, which isn't a Temu purchase, everyone has Sharpies kicking around, and then just draw lines on the tops of all the frets. Be careful not to get it on your fretboard. Shouldn't have to say that, but just take your time, draw it on it. And then what we want to do is, using a fret file, we're going to file the tops of the frets off until the Sharpie marks are all gone, which should indicate by rights the frets are all leveled. To do that, we have got this little nugget of a tool. There we go. It is a file on the back of it, little wooden handle, and there we go. And it works like such. It works very quickly, so please be careful of it. Obviously you want to try and get some big long strokes going in, just so you don't get high and low areas if you're concentrating on one part of the fretboard too much. So try and do it nice and evenly. If you want to, when you're getting very close to it, remark the frets with your Sharpie and hit it again, just so you're sure that everything is like all even and all flat and all nice and all perfect and all beautiful, to lead us on to our next step, which is a combination fret rocker and setup gauge thing. There we go. So it's got string height measurements for action. It's got little rulers on it. I don't really know how accurate it is. I probably wouldn't trust it 1,000,000%. You can use feeler gauges and it works a lot better. But for all intents and purposes, what we're doing with this, all you want to do is have the fret rocker going across some frets, try and wobble it a little bit to see if there's any play in the frets to indicate any high or low spots. If there's not, just keep moving it up and down the fretboard as you get to frets that are close together. You've got different sides on it, so 3 different sides. So when you're moving down the neck, when the frets get closer together, you can use incrementally smaller and smaller sides, which is awesome. And all we're looking for is just a little rock in the frets, indicating that one might be a little bit high. If it needs to be filed off, then you can do that. But one thing I like to do first, before I get the file back out again, is beat the shit out of my guitar. So next tool, little rubber fret mallet, and it costs this much. So on the Ibanez, I had one fret down towards the heel end of the neck where the frets are a little bit high in the center of the neck. So I gave it a few little punches with this, checked it again with the fret rocker, and it was level. It went away. Happy days. Didn't need to get the file out again. Next step in the setup process we wanted to have a look at was crowning the frets. Now there's 2 parts to this step. First is you want to protect your fretboard, and in order to do so, we have got a pair of fretboard protectors. Aluminium with a groove in it that sit over your fret. It protects your fretboard. So the bigger one is going to be on the fret stand with like the bigger spacing. So like, you know, frets 1 to 14, and then the smaller one is for the rest of the neck. The final question that we're going to have a look at is this. Again, Temu, and it cost you this much. It's going to be hard to get the camera to focus, but it's got grooves with a file inside of it. It's shaped round like a fret. So by rights, it should just basically sit onto the fret. File, happy days, you get your crown back. But, you know, as we see in the video, it sucks. It doesn't do absolutely anything. So instead, I broke out my old one, which is one of these old school little wooden handle ones with a replaceable fret file on the inside. It is starting to wear out a little bit. I should get a replacement for this soon. But, you know, for the sake of the video, it worked. So happy days. Next step. So your frets are now level and they are now crowned, but you're still going to have some file marks in it, and we want to get rid of them because file marks are crap and it makes bends all gritty and gross. So what we're going to use is some Baroque fret string eraser pluses. There's 4 different grits in it. 180, 400, 1000, 1500, 2000, and they work like this. It's just basically like a normal stationary rubber. You just rub it over the frets. I'm going to do a lot of elbow work with the 180 to try and get the file marks out of it first, and then get progressively finer polishing steps later on. To finish off the polishing process though, and this isn't from Temu, but I like to use 4-0 steel wool just up and down the neck just to get the frets looking extra shiny, and also sort of polish up the fretboard a little bit to get it nice and smooth. And then we're restringing it with a set of 9s by Elixir. I accidentally bought 9s in a 3-pack the other day, and I didn't realize until I bought one set on that I got the wrong gauge. So I usually use 10s, but this thing's getting 9s on it just for the sake of it. So once the guitar is strung up, we want to have a look at the neck relief in it. So in order to do that, capo first fret. We're going to hold down the fret where the neck of the guitar meets the body of the guitar, and at the 8th fret, we are going to use a set of these bad boys from Temu, and they will set you back roughly this much. So I'm looking for a relief somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4 of a mil at the 8th fret for this guitar, and with a bit of truss rod adjustment, we are home. It is an old guitar. I haven't played it for a long time, so it doesn't surprise me that it needed a little bit of adjusting. The next step is we are going to do the nut slots. So to do that, we're going to hold the 3rd fret down, and then using the tap test, we're just going to bounce the 1st fret to see if there's any play in it. What you're looking for is just a fraction of a bit of space in between the string and the fret where it's just going to bounce. Just a little bit of a bounce. Oddly enough, the nut slots on this are pretty good apart from the high E, but in order to fix that, we have got a set of nut files. They're 2-sided, and on each one of them, we use one of the bright ones to make it easy to see. We've got this string that they correspond to. So on the Ibanez, the high E string was a little bit iffy, so we've used this one to cut the nut slot a tiny little bit deeper just to get the string seated where it should. All right, so we have done our nut height, we have done our neck relief. Now we want to do the action at the 12th fret. So again, we're going to break out the feeler gauges that we saw before. We're going to measure the setup spec recommended height for your guitar. In my case, it was, from memory, I think about 2 mil at the 12th fret. The downside to these feeler gauges though, it doesn't have a 2 mil gauge, so I've had to combine 2 to get the thickness that I needed for the 2 mil, which, you know, isn't ideal, but it isn't the end of the world. It is what it is. So now that we've done that, I'm just going to use an Allen key. It's just one that I had in my toolbox that we're just going to use to get the strings up to where they need to be. All I'm doing on this though is the high E and low E, getting those actions at the 12th fret right, because the next step, so we're going to use a radius gauge to inform us how high or low those saddles need to come up. So the radius gauge set comes with about 14 million of them in random ass gauges that I've never actually seen a guitar with. The Ibanez that we're working on is a 15.8, so I'm going to use a 16-inch radius. What we're going to do is just wind the A, D, G, and B strings down. We're going to place the radius gauge over the high and low E strings, and then we're going to bring up the saddles until the string touches the radius gauge. And we do that by raising it a little bit at a time and then pressing the radius gauge down ever so slightly till we see the string that we want touching the radius gauge flex with it. So we're going to do that with all of the strings. And then by rights, if you're looking directly at the bridge, the saddle should all form the same radius curvature of what your fretboard is. So there'll be no buzzing and no garbage like that anywhere. Then the last sort of setup steps are going to be your intonation, but I'm not going to cover any of that because we're not using Temu screwdrivers. But if you want to learn how to do your own intonation, please have a look at a video on YouTube. It's really, really simple. All you need is a screwdriver and a tuner and you're good to go. So my take on these tools. First up, the little fretboard neck support thing. Great, useful, awesome. Needs to be taller. I wish I'm able to put the guitar sideways. So especially with backloading bridges, when you're trying to restring them, I like to have the guitar up on the side and put all the strings through in one hit, roll it back over, through the tuners, and away we go. This thing doesn't really hold the neck in place tight enough, and it's not tall enough. So I wish this was up a little bit higher to hold the guitar up a little bit tighter. As cheap as it is, it works. It does its job. I mean, I've stuck things underneath it to raise it up a little bit higher, and it does its job just fine. So would I recommend this? Kinda. There's obviously better options out there, but it works. It's okay. Notch straight edge. It's quite good. It's really heavy. It's like a really thick piece of aluminium. It won't flex. It's got 25.5 and 24.75 scale lengths on it. So you're going to do your standard Gibson scale and Fender scale. It's very clearly labeled which side is which is awesome. Downsides to it though, the edges are sharp, so you need to be careful when you've got it on your fretboard that it doesn't actually dig in if you're sliding it, moving it around. You could, if you've got a belt sander, put it on and round it off just a tiny little bit just to knock the edges off so you don't hurt anything, but it costs literally nothing and it makes adjusting your neck idiot proof because you've got a guide to tell you if it's straight or not. I do recommend this one. Next up, file. It's good. It removes material really quickly. It doesn't leave heaps of chatter marks or anything in it. The downside to it though, it's short. So I do prefer a longer sanding beam when I'm doing fretwork because that way it's a lot more even. You're not going to get little spots that you concentrate on with something short like this. For spot fixes, this would be really, really handy, but for doing regular maintenance on a guitar where you want to do fretwork on heaps, if you've got your own shop or you're doing it on more than one guitar at home or whatever, just pony up and get a proper one. This thing's all right in a pinch and it's all right for, like I said, spot fixes, but doing full necks, I really would prefer a full sanding beam. Next up, fret file. This thing is absolute trash. It didn't file anything. It doesn't work. I don't know what else to say. It's poo. It literally doesn't do anything. So do not, under any circumstance, buy one of these. They're shit. You can get other fret files off Temu and AliExpress and all that, like the Baroque ones. They look pretty good. The four-sided ones. I might check one of them out in the future, but for now, this thing's crap. Next one is the fret erasers. Comes in a little box. The 180 grit works really well. Gets the scratches out really quick. I think the 1500 and the 2000 are kind of irrelevant. Maybe they should have had a coarser grit, like an 80 or 100 grit, and then gone away from the 1500 and just gone 80 or 100, 180, 400, 1000, 2000 and be done with it. Having a coarser fret eraser for initial polishing, I think would have been great. Would have sped up things a lot more. In saying that though, they are very easy to use. The results are pretty good. It's a lot of elbow grease, but then again, you got to put in the work to get it done. Probably would have been less elbow grease with a better crowning file, but for all intents and purposes, it did the job well. And then after I hit it with the steel wool, the frets are shiny, they don't have any scratches in it, bends it smooth. So really, I can't really fault it there. Next tool is feeler gauges. They're feeler gauges. You put things underneath things and it tells you if the things are where the things need to be on the things. It works. It's a feeler gauge. There's too many of them, so maybe in the future I will just unscrew it and pull the ones off that I use on the regular and just put it on their own little clip instead of having to like trifle through 20 of it to get to the one that you need. I would like thicker ones if you're doing action height. Having like a 1.8 or a 2mm one would be really, really good. Alas, they don't have that, so you're gonna have to either combine it or use a guitar pick or whatever. Nut files. These seem to work pretty well. I've actually done a nut height adjustment on an acoustic just to test it out because I only had to do it on one for the Ibanez. They work pretty good. The downside to it though, one of them's kind of bent, so I've had to bend it back as close as I can to get it straight. Again, you get what you pay for. the actual sizes I've held up next to guitar strings that are meant to correspond to the same string on the file, and it seems like these might be a tad thicker than what the strings are. And I've noticed that as well when you're cutting out the slots. There's a bit of initial friction while you get into the nut slot, and then it cuts. So they might be a little bit thicker than what they're meant to be, but for as cheap as they do the job. I probably wouldn't trust me if you own a professional shop. Just go get a good set. I think files are one of those things you can't really cheap out on. But, you know, for the hobbyist, if you're only doing 2 or 3 guitars, then, you know, they're going to live on your shelf until you replace your nut. They're fine. Next one, hammer. It's a hammer. You hit stuff with it, and this thing hit things. Happy days. It's cheap. It's rubber. You're not going to damage anything with it if you're not stupid. So, you know, it's a good investment. Fret protectors, essential. They're kind of annoying because you've got to hold it over the end of over the fretboard like so while you're working on it, so your fingers can get in the way. I think Music Nomad make one where they wrap around the neck and like secure itself, and they look really awesome, but they're obviously a lot more money. These cost basically nothing, so I think they actually came bundled with the fret file. So again, if you're doing this to a guitar occasionally, fine. If you're doing it professionally, just pony up and get better tools. Radius gauges, awesome. I mean, they're cheap as, and they're radius gauges. They're just bent bits of metal, and they match the radius of your fretboard. With something this cheap, I wouldn't ever consider buying a more expensive version, because they do the job, and they do the job well. All it is like I said, a bent piece of metal, and it just works. Lastly is a little fret rocker. It's a piece of metal that's straight, and you're rocking on the frets, and it makes noises if you need to adjust things. It works, it's cheap. The string action gauge is helpful. It gives you some nice little measurements. The little rules on the back of it too do come in handy. They kind of get you in the ballpark with setups, but I do like to check it with a set of feeler gauges after the fact too. They're not really that far off, but when you're holding this up to your string and you're trying to see on the indicator where the string is coming up to, it's kind of hard to see exactly like an exact number. So like I said, it's good to get it in the ballpark. Check it with feeler gauges. It's never a bad idea to be precise with your measurements. And that was it. The guitar itself is playing really well. I'm going to do another video about that guitar because it's my first guitar and it's sentimental. So I might do like a little love story to my first guitar at some point. Also, I don't have a Super Strat, and I've got a guitar sitting there that has a 16 inch radius neck. It's a shredder. So I'm thinking of doing like a little mod project on it where I might upgrade some of the electronics and tuners, maybe the bridge, because the bridge block in it is like paper thin. So if that's something you guys are interested in, taking a cheap vintage Ibanez and, you know, pimping it, let me know, and then I might do that in the future. But anyway, that is enough for me. Can you set up a guitar with Temu tools? Yeah, surprisingly you can. It actually turned out a lot better than what I thought it would. Apart from the fret file. Fret file is shit. Get a decent one. If you're going to do guitars semi-regularly, maybe pony up and get a full length fret sanding beam. But, you know, for what it is, that little one works fine too.